Hello, and welcome to World Water Week. Children in the West and Central Africa region are facing multiple challenges, including insecurity, violent conflict, climate change, and all compounded by weak governmental institutions contributing to inadequate resources management. Poor water governance is also a growing conflict multiplier, particularly in water-stressed areas such as Burkina Faso, where attacks on water points are more and more recorded, and Mauritania, where conflicts over access to water points are recurrent. UNICEF and its partners are actively working towards addressing these challenges and finding ways to leverage water as a conduit for peace building rather than conflict driving. To dig deeper into this topic, I am joined by Farai Tanuma, the Global Senior Advisor for Water and Climate Resilient WASH at UNICEF, and Aidan Cronin, Global Senior Advisor for Results and Resources for WASH at UNICEF. Thank you both so much for being here and digging into this very important topic. So before we get into the technical, Farai, help us. Tell me a little bit about a day in the life of one of these children in West or Central Africa.
Thank you very much for that very important question, because when we look at statistics, we really forget that this is the daily life of a child. So UNICEF, we estimate 10 million children in the Sahel region, which is just a part of West Africa, are at risk from conflict, which you raised, from being forcibly displaced or even being internally displaced in their own countries or homes. So just the sheer thought of being displaced by itself does have quite a great mental health toll on these children. To compound to that, just their living their daily life, going to school, fetching water every day in such a difficult context is very difficult. Lots of hours are spent accompanying their parents, their caregivers, if they still have any, to just go through these daily steps. So life for a child in this region is particularly challenging. Where they are in a fairly comfortable position, they are also worried that it could be them any day, also falling into these numbers of children that are either displaced or forced to move and live in IDP camps or refugee settlements. So it is quite dire.
It's heart-wrenching. 10 million children just in the Sahel region alone. I mean, that is astonishing, staggering number. And living every day with that level of insecurity. I mean, the only word I have for it is heartbreaking and gut-wrenching.
Yes.
Aidan, for many of us, the link is maybe not so clear in terms of peace building and water and sanitation and hygiene services. So tell us a little bit more. What is the link? How is it being formed? And what happens if we don't get it right?
Thanks, Kanika. So, water is an essential part of everyone's life. We've heard it all week in Stockholm, but everybody needs water to survive, for their health, for their crops, for their animals. So, we can't survive without water. The problem is when that access to water becomes challenging, or when sanitation and dignity become compromised, and that can drive attacks on women and a lot of other gender-related issues and challenges. But coming to the region, as Farai said, huge numbers of children affected by conflict, 65 million people in need of humanitarian assistance across West and Central Africa. So huge needs, and a lot of tensions being driven by not only political stability and increasing fragility, but also changing climate, over abstraction of groundwater resources, increasing population, tensions between different users of water for agriculture, pastoralists, herders, getting into conflict over who can access the water. So on the flip side, it's not all negative. There can also be positive impacts from the way that we plan and program water projects and water and sanitation projects, which are really around, you know, engaging communities, understanding potential conflicts, and building programs around those to avoid those issues.
Brilliant. I mean, I think you spelled it out quite well here. What I'm taking away with me is, that importance of dignity and ensuring that level of dignity, but also that, climate change is really going to intensify this challenge. And the importance of water governance. I don't know if I've ever heard a better case for the importance of water governance here. I mean, you've mentioned so many different stakeholders, and that key link between managing those resources well and how that affects the security levels that Farai mentioned and alluded to earlier. Thank you so much for that. Farai, I mean, as Aidan said, it's not all bad, but there is definitely something to be concerned about here. What initiatives are being taken to support the efforts to bring peace to the region and from the WASH perspective? And are there successful approaches that we could try to be replicating?
Yes, that's really an excellent question. And indeed, there is hope for these children. From the UNICEF perspective, we have a peace-building approach to our WASH work, and this approach puts children at the center. So it really works around strengthening social cohesion within their communities, building those relationships across the communities with the government, and also really working towards equitable and inclusive access. So here we really look at access, whether it's health, education, water and sanitation. And we then reinforce all these systems so that when shocks and stresses do approach, at least there is that ability to cope and to become resilient. We have quite a number of successful programs that we've been able to work on in the region. For example, we have transboundary investments in water management in Mali, and this has been really focused on reducing pressure on natural resources, notably water access. And often when we don't manage this is in itself the source of the conflict. So by ensuring that pastoralist border regions, for example, between Mauritania, Mali, and Senegal, are also integrated into this program, we make communities within those areas able to live in peace together despite their differences in terms of demand for water resources and indeed water and sanitation services. We also have things like the Nigeria small towns approach in Palka, in Damboa, in other towns. And here we are working around reducing the high water trucking costs and water conflict that builds up when households are not able to afford these water services, and really strengthening water security planning so that drinking water is available from the catchment to the communities and the consumers. In Burkina Faso, our humanitarian development peace nexus approach also allows us to have strategic partnerships and leadership in programming from the communities and partners and governments within the region so that we build the resilience of communities. So there are multiple examples, and one of the more exciting ones is also some of the work we are doing with German Development Corporation, UNICEF, WFP, GIZ. So you can see the power of partnership. And we are working across 5 countries within the region so that we are again building community resilience, we are strengthening systems, we are implementing disaster risk reduction approaches, and making sure that peace building is the center of all these initiatives so that we do have much more coherent societies and communities in that region. So there is, like I said, hope.
It's promising to hear, and it sounds like there is definitely a way forward. Aidan, I'd like to come back to you. Farai has really, underlined here the importance of strengthening social cohesion. So tell us a little bit about how social cohesion can be strengthened here and bringing together diverse and often conflicting communities in some of these areas.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first key step in it's really to understand what are the drivers of conflict if you're to address the issues of social cohesion. So we've been building conflict analysis into our WASH programming more and more. Actually, that's not just in West African region, but also across several other regions, Middle East and North Africa, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen. We've been doing similar work in East Asia and Pacific, Papua New Guinea, Myanmar also. So there's a lot of a growing body of experience on conflict analysis in to support WASH programming to be done in the right way. So that's maybe the first and critical key step, and this is part of the guidance that we've recently released on WASH and Peacebuilding. So it's available on our website, but it really tries to give a step-by-step account of how to build social cohesion and peace building and de-escalate conflict with WASH as a driver for that. Then there's a lot of other work that can be happening as well at different levels. I alluded to some of that. We need to, of course, strengthen national policies, strategies, capacities on understanding the water resources. We've been working with the government of Mauritania on defining the integrated water resource management approaches, and a lot of national system strengthening in terms of also building monitoring systems. We really need to understand the groundwater resource and to be able to track it. And then, of course, we need to have sustainable infrastructure in place, sustainable in both from an energy and from a usage perspective. A lot more solar powered systems being developed, but also approaches around sustainable sectors for water and sanitation, actually. So these are very important approach. We've been working especially with the Netherlands on a program in West Africa, in 5 countries in West Africa, around sustainability of checks of sectors. And then I mentioned earlier how climate change is driving changes that we are still not fully understanding in terms of rainfall patterns and availability of groundwater resources. We've had fantastic support from partners like SIDA to develop our climate rationale and our shift to make all WASH services climate resilient. So, but then what we need to do, of course, is ground this in local communities, and that's extremely important to come back and again put that conflict analysis and national support processes into the context of the local community and what are the issues that are affecting them. So in Mali, for instance, we've been working with local farmers associations to look at how they're using water and what those different potential tensions could be around water usage, and to try and stem those off before they become an issue. And then local governance as well. Early warning systems are increasingly being spoken about. They can help stem off challenges, at least identify challenges before they become at a kind of a crisis tipping point. So it's a combination of all of these issues, but we're seeing much more focus now on really understanding the resource that we're tapping into more and more to be aware of potential conflicts before they arise.
I think it's really great that you really underscored for a moment there the importance of also thinking about sanitation, because I think very much in this conversation it's very easy to think that this is just a water issue, but you've really brilliantly highlighted there. There's very much a sanitation component here, and we cannot forget the importance of sanitation in all of this. I also want to just come back very briefly to you about the guidance you mentioned. So there's a new guidance report that you've put out. If you could mention it again and tell us a little bit about who that report is for, who needs to be picking that up.
Yeah, so this was a guidance that we released earlier this year. There's been a lot of themes around peace building, not only here in the Stockholm World Water Week, but also around World Water Day earlier this year, and how WASH can be a driver for peace and conflict de-escalation. To mark World Water Day this year, we had released guidance on WASH and peace building, mainly for WASH practitioners who will be planning and implementing WASH programs, but of course national governments, stakeholders. I think increasingly ministries of finance need to be thinking about these types of approaches so that they're adequately supporting their ministries of water and sanitation. It's not just about the conflict, it's about the drivers of conflict increasingly. Climate, as we mentioned, but also understanding the resource and putting adequate focus into integrated water resource management also.
Brilliant, thank you. We're coming up close to the end of our session. 20 minutes goes by quickly. We do have a few minutes left, and in that time, I'd like you to share with us a little bit who needs to be part of this conversation. If you could tell our audience what their role needs to be, how they can be engaging, who do we need to have at that decision table, what do you hope to be working more with as you strengthen in this area? What do you hope others will prioritize? Please, Farai.
Yes, for me, a big key message is to practitioners within the sector. So, conflict sensitivity, peace building is no longer an add-on. It is front and central of implementation of water and sanitation projects, particularly in these fragile contexts. Climate change, we definitely now need to ensure that climate risk is really well integrated into all our responses, and really ensuring that not only are we just doing these assessments, but we are also putting in solutions that take into account the sort of changes and adaptation needed for us to be able to positively respond to climate change. Water security through the lens of water resources management, also critical. So already here you see it's a whole myriad of practitioners from our colleagues working in the environment space, the climate space, the finance space, because we start to see more climate finance even needing to be applied in these very fragile contexts, and also upskilling of ourselves as sector practitioners. So academia also has a part to play. And in some instances, also private sector being able to expand service access through a lot of the advances they have made, particularly around monitoring, early warning, which Aidan also spoke about, which is being applied in other sectors and more so needed in our sector.
Thank you so much. So what I'm taking away from that, I think the most important message that you wrote or you spoke to there is that peace building is not an add-on. We need to think about it from the beginning. Aidan, we just have just over a minute left with us. Tell us who needs to be involved.
Echoing Farai's points, but maybe also adding youth in the equation, because they are the ones who are going to have to lift this up. The future generations are inheriting this through no fault of their own. We have a lot of youth engagement programs happening around climate, but what we have seen in positive examples of building bridges across communities that are experiencing conflict. I can give you an example from Lebanon, where we have seen integrating youth from different communities around projects like green space, or urban green space development, also getting youth, upskilling youth with practical skills on WASH system development, like pipeline building.
Wow.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of integration across refugee and hosting communities in this type of approach. There's a lot of work that has happened with other partners around in small-scale agriculture, livestock, and also market gardening, where really bringing communities together can really make an impact and a common good. And ultimately, everybody wants the best for their child, so they will listen to their children when they come back and say, actually, what is this conflict actually for?
Wow, that's a very powerful message. We do listen to our children. That's a really valuable tool there. I also bring with me the need to build the capacity of youth to be able to engage. So not putting the onus on them, but putting the onus on us to say, please bring them to the table, but do so in a way that they are capacitated to participate. Thank you so much, Farai and Aiden, for being part of this conversation and for bringing it to the attention of all of us, the importance of WASH and peace building efforts, or WASH as an opportunity to strengthen peace. And I'm also noting here, UNICEF is really calling on all actors to support actions at reinforcing social cohesion and peace building in the communities around our world. Thank you very much. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. Thank you to those online as well.